All right, thank you. And I'll leave it there. The New South Wales Premier joins us now.
Good morning, everybody. In the last 24-hour batch, we had over 4,000 people tested, and that reflects the people who got tested on Sunday. And whilst this is much higher than the previous weekend, we're still keen to try and sustain at least 8,000 tests a day, every day of the week. So please don't be afraid to come forward on weekends. Please know that all the clinics, the GPs and also emergency departments are available to take your phone call and to give you advice if you feel you have symptoms of COVID. It's really important for as many people as possible to come forward and get tested. But in that batch of over 4,000 tests, there were 5 new cases, which again is a good result given what the results we were experiencing a couple of weeks ago in March. I also want to stress to everybody that May will be a bit different for everyone, and I said that at the end of each month I would give an update of what May would look like. Already the government's made clear that we want schools to go back in May. From May 11th, schools will be returning, students will be going back to face-to-face teaching. And I do want to stress that we're very hopeful that the first few weeks of school returning will result in us being able to possibly truncate the process, to have full-time student attendance face-to-face quicker than we anticipated. That is our goal, that is our mission. But of course, we wanted to introduce the staged approach to make sure all of our schools are ready for any unforeseen issues that might arise, but also ready in case there is a breakout in a local community and they can respond quickly. But our aim following May 11 is to get schools back to full attendance as soon as we can. It will be staged for the initial fortnight, and then based on those results, we'll be able to update the community on how quickly we can have full-time attendance. Again, that will be based on how things go, but we're hopeful that students will be getting full-time face-to-face teaching during and definitely by the end of term 2. I also wanted to stress 2 further things which might make May look a bit different. Secondly, I raised yesterday the prospect of increased retail activity. We've already seen in New South Wales. I suspect because of the low number of cases and also because of the advent of schools going back, some retail outlets have chosen to reopen their doors, and of course they're allowed to do that. We encourage people to buy what they need, to buy what they want, but please make sure that when you're in those shops, when you are shopping, that there's good social distancing, but also that you follow all the hygiene requirements. And of course the retail outlets themselves have to follow those requirements in terms of making sure they have social distancing in their stores. They also have hand sanitizer available, and we want to make sure that both the retailers and customers appreciate what they need to do. So please know that is something the government encourages, but also wants to make sure that everybody sticks to those social distancing rules when you're out and about shopping. The third change in May, which will commence from Friday, is, as you know, we've currently not allowed people to go visit each other in their homes. From May the 1st on Friday, 2 adults will be able to go and visit anybody else in their home on the basis of care, on the basis of reducing socialisation and everybody's mental health. We know that for many people they've been cooped up in their homes for a number of weeks, and with the exception of exercising medical needs or buying what they need to or going to work, many people have been isolated in their homes. So please know that from Friday, 2 adults can go and visit anyone else, and we've said, I've used the word adults to say that obviously if you've got young children, it's okay to take them with you, but a maximum of 2 adults will be able to visit anybody else. But I do want to stress that if you're visiting someone who's over 70 years of age or someone with a comorbidity, you have to practice really good social distancing. If you have the mildest sniffle, do not go and visit anybody. If you're feeling slightly unwell or fatigued, please do not risk it. Don't visit anybody. Similarly, if you're over 70, we still recommend you keep leaving the home to a minimum. But if you do feel you need to go and visit someone in their home, please make sure, similarly, you ask questions about making sure everybody is well, making sure that everybody practices good social distancing. So I want to thank the community for really supporting our initiatives during the last month. It's been difficult for many, and please take May as a sign of us doing well, as a sign of New South Wales moving towards easing restrictions, and certainly with the advent of school, increased retail activity, and now people being able to visit each other in their homes to reduce social isolation and improve mental health are three key areas which we expect to see increased activity during May. But having said that, whilst we are keeping control of the spread and reducing the spread, we know that the period of isolation and the restrictions have had a devastating impact on jobs and the economy, and please know the priority of our government is to restore those jobs, is to provide that economic stimulus where we can. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by the outstanding Minister for Planning, Rob Stokes, who is ensuring that we expedite the approval process for key projects in New South Wales. He will discuss in detail the first tranche we're looking at. There's 24 projects we have identified that will boost billions into the economy and provide jobs if they get approved. But obviously by expediting the approval process, it means those jobs, those projects hit the market earlier than they otherwise would, and that is a huge boost for the economy, but also the prospect of more jobs, and that is what we are all about. It's obviously dealing with the health crisis, but also appreciating the devastating impact this has had on people's ability to work, and we're looking to do everything we can to boost jobs and stimulate the economy as well. But overwhelmingly, I just wanted to thank all of our residents for your patience. Please know relief is around the corner. So I guess the biggest change from Friday for most people will be that that two adults can go and visit another household. Please do that responsibly. We trust everybody to do it responsibly. Don't take risks. We don't want to see the numbers suddenly spike up because people are being irresponsible. And I'm absolutely confident that people will be responsible because there's too much at stake. I anticipate during May we will see more cases, and that's because when you increase activity, when you see people move around more frequently, you will see more cases. But our health system will be able to cope with that because we've used this time during April to build up our capacity, to get the extra PPE and to make sure that we're ready, whether it's in schools, whether it's people going shopping, or whether it's people now visiting houses, two adults at a time.
OK, so a slight easing of restrictions come Friday. That's the main message there from the New South Wales Premier. Christina Hearn begins our coverage in Melbourne, and parents are being warned literacy and numeracy skills will suffer the longer students are kept from the classroom, Chris.
That's right, Ali. This is research from 5 of our leading universities and educational institutions, which has been released by the federal government. It shows that almost half of Australian students will suffer significant learning and wellbeing setbacks from missing large chunks of school. And it really is our vulnerable students that will suffer the most. Disadvantaged students stand to lose 6 weeks of numeracy and 4 weeks of reading if online learning continues for 2 terms. Of course, this all ramps up pressure on the states over school closures. Victoria is the only state which is committed to remote learning for the entirety of Term 2. That is despite evidence from three of our leading infectious disease experts from around the country that have called into question Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews' tough stance on schools, saying all the evidence points to schools now being safe to reopen. Ali.
OK, thanks, Chris.
All eyes are on China this morning as 2 of its scientists are being reportedly investigated by an Australian intelligence agency. This as the nation's ambassador warns against our government pushing too deep into an inquiry. Political reporter Kerry Axley has more. Kerry, good morning to you. A lot of questions without answers this morning.
Good morning, Carl. There certainly are. The Australian government wants an independent and international inquiry to look into a whole range of things around the outbreak of coronavirus. But China's ambassador in Canberra has been very critical of that position, claiming it would damage relations to the point that Chinese parents would make the decision to stop sending their children to university here, or consumers would stop eating Australian beef or drinking Australian wine. Now, that type of talk is concerning because China is Australia's biggest trading partner, but the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, was firm in her response, rejecting any suggestion that economic coercion, as she put it, is an appropriate response to very reasonable calls for an inquiry into the origins of the virus, and Labor is on board with the government's position here.
I think China needs to just step back a bit. All that people want to know is, how did it happen? I mean, this virus has changed Australia forever, and it's had dreadful health consequences.
According to a News Corp report, Western intelligence agencies trying to find answers about the origins of the virus are looking at 2 Chinese scientists, both reportedly working at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that was apparently studying links between coronaviruses and bats. Both have studied bats here in Australia at the Australian Animal Health Laboratory near Geelong. Carl?
More on that story shortly. The Australians, meantime, are embracing the COVID Safe app with more than 2 million downloads in the 24 hours since its launch. The Prime Minister has congratulated the country but is pushing for more people to download the app, aiming for at least 40% of the population to get on board.
Some of the country's most popular beaches have reopened just minutes ago with strict rules in place. Today, Sydney reporter Gabrielle Boyle is at Bondi Beach. Gabby, are many swimmers and surfers keen to get back into the water there? I imagine they would be.
They certainly are, Alex. Bondi Beach is back in business, and isn't that a sight for sore eyes? People back in the water this morning. It's a beautiful thing. It's a cloudy day, but it is gorgeous here. We've got the blokes in their budgie smugglers and their boardies, and the girls in their Speedos, swimming caps, out there in the water. It's about 19, 20 degrees at the moment, but let me tell you, nobody is complaining about those relatively cool temperatures here in Bondi. People are just so relieved to have this iconic beach back up and open. I can tell you also that Bronte and Tamarama are open today as well. They're going to be open from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m, so not right through the evening, but just during the day. And they're only open to swimmers and surfers. So you can't be sunbaking, you can't be meeting friends here and having a social event, you can't be bringing the kids down to play in the sand. This is strictly for swimmers and surfers only. And other good news, further up the coast in Queensland, the Spit, one of the most iconic beaches on the Gold Coast, that's also open for business today. It is it's nice to be bringing you some good news, Alex.
Great news, Gabby. Thank you.
Queensland has toughened penalties for those caught spitting or coughing at frontline workers. Today's Jessica Millwood is on the Gold Coast. And Jess, it's disgraceful this is even happening. What are the new fines?
It's so disappointing that it's come to this, Ali, but the government says it's been forced to act after an increased reporting in this happening to our frontline workers. So effective immediately, $1,300 on-the-spot fine for those offenders that are caught spitting, sneezing or coughing on workers. And if it goes to court, that could be increased to $13,000 and offenders could face a criminal record. This extends, of course, to our doctors, our nurses, our people in the COVID fever clinics, but also those people that are out there keeping our economy running. People like airport workers, shopkeepers, those doing food deliveries, and also our council workers. These workers who are just simply doing their job and then face disease testing after these despicable acts. Ali?
Thanks, Jess.
Sure is despicable. Also making news today, thousands of Queenslanders left devastated by the 2011 floods have been hit with another blow. Today's Ashlyn Kukelis is in Brisbane. Ashlyn, good morning to you. What is this all over?
Good morning, Carl. Well, many people will remember that late last year, around 7,000 victims of the 2011 floods won a landmark class action case when a New South Wales Supreme Court judge ruled that operators of the Wivenhoe Dam were negligent in their handling of that huge amount of water that went on to flood Brisbane and Ipswich. That was a huge relief for flood victims, but now they have been informed by their lawyers, Maurice Blackburn, that they may only receive a fraction of the compensation they had been hoping for. This is because the engineers who were working on the dam were employed by SEQ Water, Sunwater and the Queensland Government. We know that SEQ Water and Sunwater have already appealed the decision. The Queensland Government has said it won't be appealing, but Maurice Blackburn has informed its clients that it's understood it will be argued that the engineer who was employed by the Queensland Government is less culpable because they were less responsible. It's understood it will be argued that that engineer was responsible for less than 1% of the damages that happened during those floods. Carl, all this will play out in a court in New South Wales over 3 days from tomorrow. Anyone in Queensland who needs to give evidence will do so from here. Unfortunately for everyone who lost their homes and everything they own, it's been almost a decade now and this saga just keeps dragging on.
Still so messy, Ashlyn, isn't it? Thank you. Alex.
Thanks, Carl. Let's check your sport. And the NRL is a step closer to resuming, with the New Zealand Warriors granted approval by the federal government to travel to Australia.
eyes are on China this morning as two of its scientists are being reportedly investigated by an Australian intelligence agency. This as the nation's ambassador warns against our government pushing too deep into an inquiry. Political reporter Kerry Axley has more. Kerry, good morning to you. A lot of questions without answers this morning.
Good morning, Carl. There certainly are. The Australian government wants an independent and international inquiry to look into a whole range of things around the outbreak of coronavirus. But China's ambassador in Canberra has been very critical of that position, claiming it would damage relations to the point that Chinese parents would make the decision to stop sending their children to university here, or consumers would stop eating Australian beef or drinking Australian wine. Now, that type of talk is concerning because China is Australia's biggest trading partner, but the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, was firm in her response, rejecting any suggestion that economic coercion, as she put it, is an appropriate response to very reasonable calls for an inquiry into the origins of the virus, and Labor is on board with the government's position here.
I think China needs to just step back a bit. All that people want to know is, how did it happen? I mean, this virus has changed Australia forever, and it's had dreadful health consequences.
According to a News Corp report, Western intelligence agencies trying to find answers about the origins of the virus are looking at two Chinese scientists, both reportedly working at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that was apparently studying links between coronaviruses and bats. Both have studied bats here in Australia at the Australian Animal Health Laboratory near Geelong, Carl.
Two Chinese scientists who previously worked with the CSIRO here in Australia on live bat research in a Geelong lab are being investigated by intelligence agencies as part of a probe into the origins of the coronavirus. This all comes as tensions between our two nations escalate dramatically. The director of the Australia-China Relations Institute at UTS, Professor James Lawrenson, joins me now. James, thank you for your time today. The front page of the Herald Sun today, well, I think it's going to disturb some Australians. There it is right there, Operation Batman. Chinese scientists who worked here linked to the virus outbreak in Wuhan may not be the panacea, I don't reckon, for Australia-Chinese relations this morning.
It's probably not the best start to the day, Carl, but, you know, this is the state we're in with Australia-China relations at the moment. It seems like every day the front pages are full of news about China. Some of it's fair enough, some of it's a bit of a stretch of the truth. So I haven't had a chance to catch the Herald Sun paper this morning, but I'll keenly read it later on.
OK, would it be a shock to Australians, the CSIRO and Chinese Academy of Sciences are working closely together on certain things?
Well, it depends on the nature of the research, Carl. I mean, if it's about finding a cure, that's exactly what we want Australian scientists to be doing with Chinese scientists. So I'll have to wait and see to read the article.
There are great things that can come potentially from us working together, but at the moment the relationship is strained. In regards to our economic relationships, the Chinese ambassador, he's been provocative, hasn't he? He says Australia's push for an inquiry is dangerous, politically motivated, at the behest of the Trump government. In regards to tourism, he says, why should we go to a country that is not so friendly to China? And in regards to exports, he says, well, he also says Chinese consumers may lose taste for Australian beef and wine. I mean, how does that sort of tone go down?
Well, I think it's pretty undiplomatic and it's not particularly helpful. I think Marise Payne, our foreign minister's got her messaging right. She says that when you have a virus outbreak like this, the Australian public would expect the government to be pushing for an independent international inquiry. That said, let's also not panic about the Chinese ambassador's remarks. I mean, he wasn't saying the Chinese government is going to close the border to Australian wine or beef. He's just suggesting in the future the Chinese public may not be so fond of it.
No, it's a veil. I think it's a veiled threat from the Chinese ambassador.
Yeah, so the next thing to ask is what's the validity of it? I mean, we've seen these sorts of comments before from the Chinese diplomats. In 2018, there were talkings about Chinese students potentially not coming to Australia, Chinese tourists. Well, in fact, you look at the data after that, and more of them came to Australia than ever before. I mean, my contact with the Chinese public and Chinese households is that overwhelmingly they remain pretty positive about Australia.
The idea of diplomacy is diplomacy. This has worked its way into the public forum now. This is a difficult one to sort out. How do you see it progressing?
Look, I think it's going to be okay as long as Marise Payne, our Foreign Minister, and our Prime Minister make it clear that this is simply about Australia protecting its interests and pushing for an independent international inquiry.
How is that a bad idea, an independent inquiry?
Well,
anyone?
it's not. If you're asking me, I'm not suggesting it is. But here's the thing. We do have to be diplomatic about it because some absolutely mad language is coming out of the United States at the moment towards China and the US. I mean, we can't be naive about this. At the moment, they're like 2-3-year-olds in a playground throwing stuff at each other. So we don't want to give the impression to China that we're blindly lining up behind the US. And I'm not suggesting that we are, but that's just what we've got to be careful of.
OK, we can't really afford a broken relationship, can we?
No, we can't. I mean, there's $160 billion worth of Chinese demand for Australian goods and services last year. But as I said, let's not panic. I don't think that's all at risk just yet.
James, good to talk to you. Thank you for your time.